What's going on, college football fans? Welcome back to the first and long college football show. We are live for you here to bring you our Week 3 predictions, and we've got our Week 3 top 25 ranking. First and long style. Mason, how you doing this morning? It's 5:30 in the morning here on the East Coast, 5:45 to be exact. And I'm ready to talk some football. I've been watching stuff all night. I had to work all night last night. I've been watching all kinds of videos and watching all the highlights from last week. I think I'm ready to make some picks and predictions this week. What say you, man? How you doing?
Yeah, 100%. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. We had an eventful week 2. Didn't get to do a reaction pod because I was working all weekend, really. Made it a little bit tough to do a reaction video, but it was an interesting week. I think we learned a little bit about some teams, and this week is kind of similar, I feel like, to week 2, where if you just kind of do a roster check and look at all the games and the schedule, might leave a little bit to be desired. But we're starting to get into some conference play, and that to me is where we really start to kind of figure out about some of these teams, because right now, after 2 weeks, I don't feel like we know a ton about a lot of the top 15 teams or so. And so I'm ready to break it down with you, see kind of what we do know about these teams and what we can derive from that. It's kind of gut check week here in week 3, as we really get into conference play come next week.
Yeah, we definitely learned some stuff in week 2. Obviously, the Florida Gator situation. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit in passing, as we're going to be discussing the South Florida at Miami game coming up this weekend. We also are going to talk about Clemson at Georgia Tech, Texas A&M at Notre Dame, Georgia at Tennessee. I think that Vanderbilt going on the road to South Carolina is really interesting this weekend, one that I'll certainly have my eyes on. So there's definitely, again, in week 3, I think the slate is a little bit better than what people are wanting to give it credit for. And I think there's going to be some really close games. And that's reflected in these lines, honestly, where 3 of the 4 games we're talking about today have single-digit lines. But before we get into that, let's go into the top 25. I think we did that out of order last week. I think we need to hit the top 25 and then jump into our predictions. What do you think?
Yeah, we did change it up. So this week it's going to be a top 15. So we're doing a little bit more of, I don't want to say a power ranking because we don't really base it off of that, but your top 15 teams instead of a top 25. I think it just, you really get past the top 15, and there are certainly some teams that are up and on the rise at 16 through 25, but it just becomes a lot to talk about. So a top 15, I feel like, is appropriate, especially this early in the season.
Yeah, I think so. And honestly, I mean, I think that it's the perfect number, considering, right now we've got the 12-team playoff. I know we're going to get to a 16 team, which I'm against, for the record, but I like 12 because you got those first few teams out. And look, it's never too early to talk playoffs. Okay, it's never too early to talk playoffs, especially in college football, where 3 losses could possibly knock you out of a college football playoff discussion. So I think it's never too early to discuss the college football playoff. And I'll tell you exactly what my formula was in my head, or I guess exactly is the wrong word. I'll give you an idea of how I was looking at this stuff. I think it's pretty simple, though. Big wins, right? Losses at this point. There's lots of teams that don't have any losses, so you have to consider the losses as so. And then teams that have played, 1 or more Power 4 teams. I think that makes a huge difference. Those are things that you got to kind of look at right now. And then, of course, you're going to have your preconceived notions built in somewhat. I mean, it's inevitable not to have some kind of preconceived notion built in. You know, what we were thinking about these teams preseason, knowing what the rosters look like. I mean, it's 2025. We know what talent is where for the most part. There's always players that come out of nowhere, but I mean, 95% of it, we know the player before the year starts, and we're already looking at that guy for production. And all right, let's jump into our top 15 here. UCF at USF, excuse me, that was sacrilegious of me. USF at 15, I think, is the highlight of this page. But as you can see here, we talked about some of those losses. 12 and 13, those are a couple of teams with losses. And I think until they get some good wins, right? Notre Dame's got a chance to do so this weekend. We're going to talk about them. Till they get some good wins, I think that you're going to continue to see them kind of hang around that area or falling farther down in the ranking. What are your thoughts, 11 through 15? Illinois moving on up. They looked a lot better this weekend than what I thought they would going against Duke. I think Illinois is actually pretty doggone good. I like the defensive line. Luke Altmaier's obviously pretty nice at this point. I like Brett Bielema. I like that whole situation over there. What do you think 11 through 15?
Yeah, really like these teams where they're at. I think Notre Dame only having played one game so far. They were one of the anomalies who had a bye in week 2 without playing that week 0 game. But we'll find out more about Notre Dame. We got a prediction coming out on them versus Texas A&M. Really interested to see kind of what they look like in a challenging test and how they perform. Texas came back a little bit last week against San Jose State. Arch looked a little bit better. Jury's still out, I think, on Texas. Really good defense. I'm interested to see how their offense progresses. Ole Miss, I think you could argue kind of keeping them out in this top 15 here. Didn't really look great against Kentucky. Kentucky kind of had the luck of the draw early in that game, though. And kudos to Ole Miss for being able to step it back up later in the football game to come back and win that one. Got to see what Austin Simmons looks like. I know he got a little bit of a nagging injury at the end of that game, so we'll have to kind of monitor his injury status moving forward. And of course, USF, best record in college football right now, in my opinion, going 2-0 against top 25 teams. If they win this week against Miami, I really feel like you can go ahead and pencil them into the playoffs. If they're good enough to beat Miami this week, which is a tall task, I think it's a 17.5-point spread. But they should not only be good enough to win out and make it to the college football playoffs, we might potentially be talking about a top 5 team in USF, which is interesting to think about. And that's just strictly from a rankings perspective, not necessarily a power rating perspective. But that's certainly what the committee cares about, is how you perform against your schedule. Just a couple of honorable mentions that I had circled. Missouri, I think, is a very interesting team in the SEC right now and looked very strong. Offensively, they're really interesting with Bo Prabula. They've got a little bit of a rushing attack this year. Offensive line looks okay. And then on the defense, I think that they're upper middle of the pack in the SEC, which is an upgrade for them. Also, Utah, I've got as an honorable mention. I think that right now they're my pick to win the Big 12. And then Tennessee, I also have this offense for Tennessee with Joey Aguilar is far and above, just beyond expectations for what we had going into this year after they lose Nico. Seemingly, they've gotten on better on the offensive side of the football. And we know defensively they were going to be good, and they definitely look really solid on defense. We'll be breaking down the Tennessee and Georgia game here in just a bit. Love to see you over there.
10 through 6 here. South Carolina, Iowa State, obviously coming off of a big win there in the Cy-Hawk Trophy Showdown. Iowa State, got a couple of decent wins so far this year. Georgia at number 8. Georgia's trending down in our rankings. We're going to talk more about Georgia, so we'll kind of just save that. But I'm not super high on what I've seen out of the offense so far, which is why I've got them trending down. Not to mention just no good wins yet. Playing just a couple of nobodies. So we'll talk more about Georgia in that matchup with Tennessee this week. That's where game day will be. That's going to be a big one. Florida State at the 7 spot. They beat somebody 70-11 to nothing basically this past week. Oklahoma at the 6 spot. This team obviously has trended way up in our ranking, and rightfully so. After a big win, I thought Oklahoma just looked really, really good this past week, man. I mean, we knew the defense was going to look good. We were interested to see how Wink Martindale and that defense was able to handle John Mateer, and the answer was they weren't able to handle John Mateer. Put him in a couple of tough situations, but for the most part, man, it seemed like he was like one step ahead. And as far as being one step ahead, he's one step ahead in the Heisman race now, because most would consider that to be a Heisman moment, and I think he delivered, and I think he looked really, really good. I'm concerned about the Oklahoma offense not having a rushing attack, but John Mateer supplements that, and that helps a lot. I'm a little concerned about like long term if he's going to be able to do that throughout an entire SEC schedule. I think Oklahoma needs to find some answers at the running back position, but man, I was impressed. I really was impressed because I think that's a pretty good defense out there for Michigan as well. So I think Oklahoma is one of the biggest winners in week 2 going into week 3 with the rankings, as well as Iowa State. What do you think about this group?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I thought Oklahoma looked really, really solid. Once again, they've got a very strong defense. I think they're excellent against the run. They were able to kind of put Bryce Underwood in a box this past week. And, as good as Bryce Underwood looked, I thought he looked really solid as a true freshman. John Mateer is a more experienced and a better quarterback and looked like a better leader of the offense at this point in his career. Naturally, that kind of should be the case considering the experience of those two players. But I like Oklahoma at the 6th spot. Going to be interesting in a couple of weeks when they go and face Texas. That game I've got circled as one of the games of the year. I'm very interested to watch that matchup. Florida State has got to be the most improved team in college football right now. It's extremely interesting to me how they were able to just flip the script from one year to the next. And I think they've got to be my favorite right now to win the ACC. I don't see it any other way. They've got absolute playmakers on the offensive side of the football. And I think Castellanos is a baller. Anxious to see them moving forward. And I'm with you with Georgia. I've got them trending down. I hate it because I feel like they've got a really, really good defense. And a defense that's kind of starting to kind of shine similar to the 2021, 2022 defense. They're just very young. But on the offensive side of the football is where we both have questions, particularly at the quarterback position, I feel like. And also on the offensive line, I know they've had some injuries on the right side of that line. So if they're healthy to go against Tennessee, I think we could see a pretty strong performance by them. But that's a tough defense. So we'll get into that a little bit down the road here. They should be probably our first breakdown. But Iowa State, I like them moving up here. Huge win against Iowa. I still think that Utah is my favorite in the Big 12, like I said earlier. But, from a resume standpoint, I think that Iowa State has the better resume at this point. And then South Carolina, I feel like we don't know much about South Carolina. I think we're all enamored by Lenore Sellers for good reason. He's a hell of an athlete, but I don't know. They leave a little bit to be desired to me. I could see them moving out of the top 10, but we'll know a little bit more about South Carolina this week after they faced a pretty staunch Vanderbilt team at this point in the season. But I don't have any qualms about it. 6 through 10 right here, Mark.
There it is, 1 through 5. Ohio State, LSU, Penn State, Miami, Oregon. Honestly, I looking back at this, and I had sent a couple of lists, and maybe you could move Penn State around a little bit, and maybe Miami at 3 and Oregon at 4 and Penn State at 5. I wouldn't argue against any of those. But I don't, as far as the top 5 teams in the country, I don't think you can have a top 5 without one of the, without these guys being in it. Maybe you can rearrange the order a bit, but I think this is the top 5, just generally across the board at this point, just based on the resumes that we've seen, the games that we've seen. LSU come out a little sluggish this past week, as did Georgia, as did Clemson. Now, I don't think Georgia had an excuse, and again, I'm ready to jump on a Georgia tangent. So we'll talk about them next. But LSU and Clemson, that was pretty predictable, honestly, considering the emotional victory that LSU got, or on the other side of that, obviously Clemson on the losing end of that battle to open up the season. So I think it was kind of predictable, maybe a slow start after what was a very emotional game. A one-score top 5, top 10-ish matchup. So I don't. I'm not going to sit here and hold it against LSU. Ohio State going and beating somebody, 11-7 to nothing, does that some team that I don't even know. It doesn't really mean that much more to me than LSU going and beating somebody, 28-8 or whatever. These things, they don't equate. They don't necessarily equate. So we'll see what it all means, but I think this is your bona fide top 5 right now. Some could even argue maybe LSU at number 1. I think Ohio State being at number 1 is correct at this point. And Oregon, I wanted to actually mention Oregon after they literally just beat Oklahoma State to death this past weekend. Oregon looked really, really good. I mean, they looked really, really, really solid. I wouldn't have thought the offense would have looked quite that explosive, to be honest. Now, I don't think Oklahoma State's a good roster, but you got to give them credit. I mean, that's a Power 4 win, which is something that some of these teams can't say. Some of the teams in the top 15 anyway. And Penn State hasn't really played anybody, but they passed the eye test. They passed the eye test for sure. Anything on this top 5 before we jump into these matchups?
Yeah, I think the big one that stood out this week for me was Oregon. I was really high on Oregon last year, like a lot of people were. I mean, they went 12-0. How could you not be high on that team?
Yeah.
But after week 2, I really and maybe I'm a sucker for Oregon. Maybe it has something to do with Nike. I don't know what it is. But I'm really high on Oregon right now. And after week 2, I have them picked as my national championship winner. And we'll have to wait and see if that changes. But they just really impressed me. And the first team to me this season that has stood out, that has been kind of that team that's that could be head and shoulders above. Just really like what they do on both sides of the football. Defense, once again, they're very fast, very physical in how they play. And then on the offensive side, I think Dante Moore is a bright spot for this offense. And I didn't really have high expectations for him going into this season. I haven't seen much from him, in my opinion, to warrant the 5-star status that he came into college with. But after seeing him in week 2, I'm extremely impressed with what he's been able to do. Got to get the run game going a little bit more, I think, in some of these other matchups. But how could you not like the Ducks at this point in the season, especially considering they don't have Evan Stewart? To see them be able to do what they've been able to do with DeCorian Moore and the Sadiq, I think, at tight end. I'm just really impressed. I think a lot of that you have to give credit to Dante Moore for. and the offense, just in general, they look incredible. 1 through 4, like you said, no real update there. LSU and Penn State both struggle early. Not going to take too much out of that. I think 1 through 5 is pretty accurate.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, let's jump into our predictions going into week 3 here. We're going to break down our thoughts on these games, look at some of the spreads, and try to make some sense of these big matchups with you guys. I appreciate everybody tuning in early this morning, or if you're watching later on in the day. We certainly do appreciate you tuning in the First and Long College Football Show. Do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't done that. Helps the show out a ton, and we're looking forward to a really awesome season. I really am just super excited. I think there's a lot of teams that have a chance to do something this season, man. It's wide open. Let's jump into it because we got some games that are going to affect the college football playoff, and this one right here is one of them, almost certainly. And to be honest with you, it almost certainly is every year. Is Georgia going on the road this year to Knoxville to face the Tennessee Volunteers? Georgia is a 3.5-point favorite in this one. That's the lowest I've seen this line in several years. Over set at 50.5. We're obviously Georgia fans here. You can see the just Hall of Famer Georgia Bulldogs pictured behind me. But we pride ourselves here on really just trying to call balls and strikes. I love Georgia. I want Georgia to do well. But I'll be the first one on here to scrutinize Georgia when I don't like something. And so far this year, I have not liked what I've seen from the offense from the Georgia Bulldogs. Gunnar Stockton seems reluctant to get the ball down the field. And the offensive line, it looks like more of the same to me. And what's really odd about that, Mason, is the offensive line last year was very talented. Guys got drafted. They're in the NFL. But they never gelled. And there was a lot of injuries. So, it was one of those things where it's like, was it the injuries? Were the guys coming back too soon? They're not really ready. I don't know. I don't pretend to know all the answers to those questions. I can just tell you the offensive line last year was not up to par. It's not up to standard, not up to Georgia and national championship standards. That's for sure. And it held Georgia back, especially considering that Georgia was pocket pass centric, right? Pro style offense, got the prototypical pro style quarterback in Carson Beck last year, and it was honestly just a really big disappointment. So 2 games into the season, I haven't seen anything that has really caught my eye with the Georgia offense that makes me super, super confident in them riding their offense to winning a championship. Does that mean Georgia can't win an SEC championship? No, the offense wasn't good last year, and Georgia won the SEC championship. Okay? So I'm not writing Georgia off. I'm not writing off this offense. I'm not writing off this offensive line. It is a wait and see for me at this point. I'm still in wait and see mode. This is a good Tennessee defense that Georgia's going to be facing this weekend. Is it as good as what it was last year? I don't know. I think maybe that's yet to be seen a little bit because Tennessee, they played Syracuse, which was a pretty much a rebuilt team after last year, right? And then a no-name team last week that they beat 70-11 to nothing, right? I don't even know what the final was, but it was bad. It was the most points Tennessee had scored in a while, and that's great. The offense looked great, but they're not playing the Helen Keller School for the Blind and Deaf defense this weekend. They're playing the Georgia defense. And look, man, let's just be real about it. Georgia hasn't lost in Knoxville since 2015. This Tennessee offense hasn't thrown a touchdown pass since against the Georgia defense since 2021, I believe. Not only has Tennessee struggled to score points in this series as of late, they've struggled to get first downs in this series as of late. And we're sitting here talking about this is the best Georgia defense that we've probably seen since 21, or 22. So 50.5 points is way too many points, in my opinion, on this one. I think this is a low-scoring bout here, okay? Whoever wins this one, I think they win at 17-14. Now, put a pin in what I said about Georgia. Are we going to see some downfield passing in this game? We could. Is Georgia holding something back for this game? It would make sense why they would. I could see why Georgia would hold something back. Now, sometimes back when Jake Fromm was the quarterback, we got like into November and people were talking about, well, we're just holding it back. We're not going to – why would we pass the ball? Why would we have to pass the ball? We're going to wait till we play Alabama, and then we're going to pass the ball. And that's bull jive, man. But coming into the third game of the season, whenever you play two nobodies, and then you got to go on the road to play Tennessee, it would make a little bit more sense to really focus on yourself offensively and – work on situations in those first couple of games and really just kind of do whatever you want to do, right, against a couple of really just not good teams. I'm hoping as a Georgia fan that's what's going on with this offense. But I haven't seen this offense perform at a high level yet, so I'm not going to bet on it too. I think this is a low-scoring game, as I said, and I think the winner of this sucker wins at 17-14. Vegas thinks it's going to be Georgia. And that would fit right in the spread there. But I think the under is the play if you're going to bet this game, which I'm not. Give me Georgia to win it. I just think that the defense is too much for Tennessee. Look, Tennessee beats up on nobodies every year, and it doesn't mean a darn thing about this game. So I'm not buying into what I've seen so far of Tennessee beating teams that have no business competing with them on the field. I thought they gave up way too many yards to Syracuse through the air. And I'm interested to see if Georgia, with the revamped wide receiver room that's supposed to be pretty good, can get the ball aired out a little bit and strike this Tennessee defense where it hurts. And I think that's on the back end. Are they able to do that? We'll see. We'll see about that. What do you think about this one, man? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with you. I do think that the under is the play here. I might actually bet on that. We'll have to wait until Thursday to see if I change my opinion on this game. But one thing that does help Georgia in this matchup is Ricky Gibson being out and Jermod McCoy. Those are two solid defensive players. Jermod McCoy might be the best cornerback in college football. I think you could definitely make an argument for that. And then, Ricky Gibson, very competent cornerback as well. So your two, you got one lockdown corner in Jermod McCoy. He's out. And then, on the other side too, I think that certainly hurts Tennessee in what they want to do in this football game. Which is load the box and still be able to play man on the perimeter and stop Georgia in the passing game. They're not going to be able to play that way. They're going to have to play in a little bit more, zone type defenses, and they're just not going to be able to play man against this wide receiving group for Georgia unless they're able to bring pressure on Gunnar Stockton and he's not able to deliver the football, which is very possible. However, I saw a couple of times this season so far where, the opposing defense brought pressure, was able to create havoc in the backfield. And we saw Gunnar Stockton squirt out through the middle of that line and get, rush for 8 yards, whereas last year that was a 10-yard loss with Carson Beck. So I think that there is an advantage to having Gunnar Stockton from that sense. Now, the disadvantage is in those same plays, Gunnar was getting to his first read, maybe his second, and then tucking and running, not getting to the third and fourth who are open, right? Some of that has to do with the pressure again, but also there were some plays last week in particular. You mentioned Gunnar being reluctant. you go back and watch the film, there were a lot of plays where he missed a guy, missed a read, and decided to check the ball down or tuck it and run. And that's what's been costing Georgia in this offense. If that continues, Tennessee has a very strong case to make to win this football game. Looking at Tennessee's offense, I think Joey Aguilar has provided a spark that Tennessee fans just have to be extremely happy with. The situation involving Nico Iamaleava this summer and him transferring out, I think stirred some things up. But we said it when it happened. We said it back in February. I think we did a preview for Tennessee. There's also an opportunity for Tennessee to rally around the new quarterback and around this idea that, we were bigger than our quarterback anyways, right? Nico didn't provide that much last year for the offense for Tennessee. I think losing him has been a little bit of a benefit to this Tennessee Vols offense and the team in general. I think it allowed the team to kind of come together and figure some things out and rally behind their coach, have their coaches back. I think it was a culture building moment for Josh Heupel and the Tennessee Vols team and the program. And now in week 3, you've got an opportunity to go up against one of the biggest powerhouses in college football right now and get a win at home in front of your home crowd. You mentioned it. They haven't won at home since 2015, haven't beaten Georgia in general since 2016. And it took a Hail Mary last second play to do that.
We were there for that one.
We were there for that one. Best loss I've ever been to, I'll still say. But, looking at this game and being a Georgia fan, I was watching the game on Saturday, and I'm thinking there's no way Georgia's beating Tennessee now. There's just no way. Since then, I've kind of come down from that sort of doom and gloom headspace, and I do think that, as bad as Georgia was on the goal line in particular, in short yardage situations, they haven't been great in the red zone. They haven't been great. I just look at this defense for Georgia, and I think that is going to be the difference. They're very young, a lot of first and second year players on that side of the football, but a lot of those players are going to be future first round picks. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, there's not a team in the country that has more depth than Georgia on the defensive side of the football. And I think that you're seeing the start of something special on that side of the football for Georgia. I've been saying from the beginning that Georgia is really positioning themselves for a 2026, 2027 national championship. I don't think they win it in 2025, but there will be signs of that this year. And in big games, you're going to see some big plays being made. This could be a game for Georgia to kind of show that and prove that. But this could also be this is also the year where if Tennessee is going to get Georgia, they could do it right now. I think that I've seen enough from the offense in particular that, Tennessee could hang 30 on Georgia. And we're over here looking like idiots talking about the defense and things like that. There's just a lot of unknowns coming from the Vols, just given their schedule. And now it's time to kind of put up or shut up. I think if they're going to get Georgia in a year, I think this is as good as any. You get them at home, you get an offense that's sputtering, and you feel really good about your defense. I think Joshua Josephs in particular could be the difference in this game. Him and Dominic Bailey, Bryson Eason, a lot of the same guys we were talking about last year being absolute havoc wreakers. Not as deep as they were last year, I think for sure. But if Tennessee is able to get a pass rush and stop the run as well, that defensive line is going to be pressured in this football game. If they're able to do that, I think the offense is strong enough to be able to win this football game. I do think that Georgia wins it. I like Tennessee to cover here. I think it's a 2 or 3 point win for Georgia, but more than anything, I like the under here. I don't think that either team gets out of the 20s, and I think that there's a chance that this game's played in the teens, like you said. Give me Georgia to win it outright, but this should be a barn burner. I think College Game Day picked the right matchup this week, and I feel like this one's going to be really fun to watch. A 4-quarter game for sure.
Yeah, I think the sparks will fly in the SEC this weekend, and I think this game will be one of them. This will be a real close one, I think. And if you're gonna if you're gonna bet the spread, if you're gonna play with that 3.5, you got to you got to take the plus 3.5 there. Georgia hasn't showed us anything offensively to take them to cover that. May come out and do that this Saturday, though. We've seen Kirby Smart teams come out and shine in these big moments, and they've done that on the road in Knoxville several times. We'll see what happens. It's going to be a good one going down on Saturday at 3:30. All right, let's jump over to let's see. Let's jump over to Clemson and Georgia Tech. This is actually the noon game. We'll go chronological order for these last three here, and we'll go kind of a little quicker on these because I feel like there's less to like dig into. Although super excited to watch these. The Tigers on the road at the Yellow Jackets. It's an ACC showdown. This line was closer to like a touchdown and a couple of points preseason, and here we are. Clemson's only favored by 3.5. The over/under is set at 53.5. I saw this line at like 9 before the season started. So the betting public in Vegas has reacted to Clemson negatively so far this season, and that's due to the loss there at home against LSU, that first game of the season, and then came out and it was a slow start against Troy, and a game where Clemson had to really claw their way back into it. They turned the ball over. They just did a lot of things to shoot themselves in the foot early in that football game. Dug themselves into a hole and ended up scoring, 27 unanswered points to end up winning that thing 27-16. Meanwhile, Georgia Tech last week, they played their backup quarterback and also turned the ball over. Did not start off very hot and ended up able to, sure things up through the running backs, and backup quarterback made some decent throws. I'm trying to remember his name. I had it pulled up here, but I'm just over here winging it for some reason. But
it's Philo.
Yeah. Philo. I remember thinking it sounded like a dog's name. Mm-hmm. But 21-28, touchdown and interception. He made some good throws. There's no doubt about that. But it was the running attack that I was most impressed with from what I saw last week from Georgia Tech. But you got to take it with a grain of salt because they weren't playing some amazing team or anything. This weekend, they're going to have a much tougher matchup going against this Clemson defense. Now, look, I'll be frank with you. I saw Troy line up and run the dang ball some on this Clemson defense last week. So that really honestly surprised me. You could have said just about anything else, and I would have, it would have made sense. Like they were getting pressure, on that offensive line, which they were. But running against that defense, that just wouldn't have made much sense to me, going against a team like Troy. But now you got to face Georgia Tech and Brent Key's Georgia Tech, no less, an offensive line-minded head coach. And let me tell you something, it rubs off on these guys because Georgia Tech, they pride themselves on offensive line play. I've heard some Clemson people, or I've seen where some Clemson people have talked about, this offensive line for Tech ain't as good as what it was last year. And maybe in some spots, but I can guarantee you, as the year goes on, the offensive line will progress with Brent Key. I'm telling you now. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're already got some of those holes shored up. And they looked good running the ball by the end of the game last week with Jamal Haynes, who is an absolute beast. So, again, man, Clemson was really hurt week 1 not having a rushing attack. I think they were hurt week 2 early on in that game, not having a rushing attack. Randall ran the ball better in week 2, but then he fumbled it because he's a wide receiver. He's not a running back. He's playing a new position. I have to think that probably has something to do with it. But both of these teams, specifically Georgia Tech, has really struggled turning the ball over. So I think, again, I think this is going to be a low scoring game. I think the under is the play on this one again. And I just wouldn't be surprised at all to see Georgia Tech win this one. I would not be surprised at all to see it. There's no chance in hell I'm taking Clemson minus 3.5 here on the road. I would have to play the plus 3.5. Wouldn't be surprised to see Clemson win the game by a field goal. But the under feels, again, on this one, just like Georgia Tennessee, I feel like under feels like the play. I don't think this is going to be some kind of offensive showcase here. I think Georgia Tech's going to be able to get some penetration on that Clemson offensive line. Again, I'm concerned. Can Clemson run the football effectively? I think the answer to that right now is no. And I think it's caused quite an imbalance on the offense. And it just makes it hard on a guy like Cade Klubnik, who had a lot of confidence in coming into the season. That confidence has been dwindled away by poor offensive line play and poor rushing attack, to be honest with you. And I think it's going to limit this offense until they can get it figured out. Give me Georgia Tech to cover here. I think I haven't heard anything on Haynes, not the running back, but the quarterback. I know he sat out last week, but I've heard that Georgia Tech's putting a really big emphasis on this game. And I wouldn't be surprised if they let him sit last week just to make sure he's ready to go for this week. I haven't heard anything to corroborate that, but I have heard that Georgia Tech has had this game circled, man. And they're looking for blood on this one, for sure. And I think they feel like they've got just a wounded duck in the water right now. What are your thoughts on this game? I'm interested to see which quarterback plays. If it's the workhorse Haynes, I think Georgia Tech's able to possess the clock in this game, run the football, and I think they can win this sucker. I think he gives them the best chance to win versus Philo starting. Even though I didn't think Philo looked horrible, he made some awesome throws. That one in the back corner of the end zone that he was scrambling out to his right and threw off his back foot, I mean, that was crazy. Absolutely nuts. So he can make some throws that Haynes can't make. So it's a trade-off with these guys. But I just don't think Georgia Tech's got the wide receiver core to really have like a throwing quarterback and be able to be that balanced offense and win a game like this right now. I think you need Haynes to come back and start at quarterback. What say you? What do you think about this one?
Yeah, well, on the Haynes topic, it does sound like he is gonna play.
Okay.
You know, Brent Key hasn't just come out and said it outright, but he is practicing this week. They are prepared for him to start. But it may be another game time decision type of deal like it was last week. I tend to think that he's gonna play this week though. If that's the case, then that just opens up the running game a little bit more. It allows for more RPO. We've seen it time and time again. If Haynes King is healthy enough to run, I think that this Russian attack is going to eat against Clemson. You know, Clemson, their best unit, I think, going into the season, and I'm sure you can make an argument now, but the best unit going into the season was their defensive line. And them being able to stop the run, rush the passer, and things like that. Well, they're ranked at 37, and I know it's a small sample size. The jury's still out on this defensive line, but they're giving up 93 yards a game. And that's including half of your games being against a team called Troy. So to me, this defense isn't what we thought it would be. It's just not. The defensive line in particular looks susceptible going up against a Georgia Tech offense that is ranking in the top 15 in a lot of categories. In particular, they're averaging 271 rushing yards per game. I really feel like if Georgia Tech is able to hit 120 yards rushing in this game, I think that they're putting themselves in a position to win it. On the flip side, with Clemson, I mean, Georgia Tech doesn't have a stellar defense. I think that they're a little bit below the midpoint mark as a defense just across college football. Very average in a lot of ways. So to me, if the Clemson offense is able to establish a rushing attack, which they haven't been able to do all year, I think that could position them to win this game. And if they do not run the football very well, which they're averaging 75 yards a game right now, which is good for 129th in the country. Bottom of the barrel for sure from a rushing attack for Clemson. But if they're not able to run against Georgia Tech, I think that they're completely out of the ACC race because, I mean, you got to get something going. This isn't a stellar defensive line for Georgia Tech. This is kind of where it's either put up or shut up for Clemson. It's gut check time. And I think you need a strong rushing performance this week if you want to still win the ACC again, make the college football playoffs. We got to see something out of this rushing attack this week. This is going to be a line of scrimmage football game to me. And if you're telling me Haynes King is starting, I like Clemson in it. I definitely like them to cover the 3.5. I think, we could be in a situation where it's a field goal late to win for Clemson. But I do feel like this is going to be a really close football game. And I like the home team in this one. Give me Georgia Tech to win it. I think that's a pretty solid bet this week. Just given what we know about Clemson right now, I think maybe a lot of the public is, casual fans may not necessarily see what we've seen out of Clemson so far and may still kind of have that impression based off of preseason expectations for Clemson. I call it like I see it. And I feel like Clemson is a little bit of a phony this year for me, and if they don't have a rushing attack, I mean, these defenses are just going to sit back. They're going to put 6 in the box and ask you to beat us up front with 6 in the box. So far, they haven't been able to do that. Give me the Yellow Jackets in this one.
Yep. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think Georgia Tech is able to possess the ball in this one, and I think that if they win the possession battle here, the time of possession battle that is, that means they ran the ball well, I think, in this one. And I think that is definitely the route to a victory against Clemson. And, again, turnovers. That's obviously one that can sway this game one way or the other. Nobody's turned the ball over more this season than Georgia Tech. So going to have to shore that up here in week 3 at home against the Tigers. That's going to be a good one. All right, jumping into our next one, we got a couple of nightcap games here, and we got about 10 minutes to get this knocked out, 10 or 15 here, so let's get it going. Texas A&M Aggies going on the road to Notre Dame. This is the second of a home and home here. We watched this game last year, real close game, a game that everybody in the country was talking about last year, and it delivered. It was a defensive-minded game for sure, a defensive led football game last time we saw it. Over-under is sitting at 49.5. Notre Dame is favored by a touchdown and an extra point in this one for round 7. Nobody's been talking about Texas A&M, man. I mean, it's been like really quiet on the home front. Meanwhile, I went back and watched their game this past week where they played Utah State just because I haven't really had an opportunity to watch. I mean, I really just haven't. There hasn't been much of a reason, unless you are an Aggies fan, to really tune in, unless you do what we're doing. So I'm here to report. I saw a lot of playmakers. and I saw the offense look very explosive. Now I know it was Utah State, but I saw Terry Bussey getting involved. I saw both of the running backs getting involved. Um, Reed looked good. I thought Marcel Reed looked really good. 7 touchdowns already this season, right? 41 of 62 passing for 7 touchdowns so far this season. The offense looks very much improved to me. That I know they haven't played anybody. I get it. I get it. I mean, you can say that about whoever you want to say that about right now, just about. But I don't know, man. I mean, improvement's improvement. That certainly is a lot better looking group than what I saw last year. Not to mention the offensive line was out there mauling people. So, and on the flip side of that, Texas A&M's defense was never bad. I never felt like over the last couple of years that it was like, oh, that's their defense is going to cost them games. I think they're at least middle of the pack to upper, in the SEC pretty much season in, season out. They've put out some unbelievable NFL prospects along the defensive line and linebacker room. I don't see that stopping now. This is going to be a formidable test for Notre Dame there at Touchdown Jesus. Now, we've seen Notre Dame go toe-to-toe with Miami this season. And I'll be honest with you, going back and watching that game again, watching the highlights again, it didn't make a ton of sense to me at the time why Jeremiah Love was running the football more. I didn't necessarily agree with Notre Dame's game plan offensively in that game against Miami. It's like when you got Jeremiah Love, I mean, that's your best player. I mean, just hands down on offense, and I just didn't feel like they really utilized him. Now I see he's got 6 carries. Maybe he's banged up or whatnot. I don't know. You got a a first year starter and quarterback CJ Carr, who I really like the prospect of. I think he's going to be good, but I mean, this is going to be his third start. I don't know, man. I Notre Dame, I'm still waiting to see that ground and pound offense this season. Um, there's some new faces on the offensive line. We've all known Notre Dame over the last really couple of decades to reload, not really rebuild at offensive line. So you've just kind of come to expect that. I'm not so sure that it's that simple. And this is a talented group they're going against. I don't think this Notre Dame team is as good right now as what they were last year, and I think Texas A&M is considerably better, specifically on offense. I like the underdog here, going on the road and keeping it closer than 7. Again, I think this is another field goal game, and I'm thinking the home team can pull this off. If the dominoes fall correctly and they play some good football where they're running the ball well, and protecting, I see this one being low scoring. Again, I don't see this being like a Notre Dame's got a good defense. Texas A&M's got a good defense. I don't see either one of these offenses just overwhelming the other's defense. So 49.5 makes sense to me. I would maybe lean under while that hook is still there, but I'm really interested in Texas A&M plus 7 on this one. I really am. I just kind of got a gut feeling, and what I've seen with the explosivity on offense, I like them to be able to hit a couple of big plays against this Notre Dame defense throughout the course of the game. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think what kind of scares me away from this game for the most part is it just being a home game for Notre Dame. And them not playing last
They're
week
good at
too.
home.
They got the bye last week. Look, in their matchup, in Notre Dame's matchup versus Miami, I thought Notre Dame was the better team. To be honest with you, I really felt like if that game lasted 5 more minutes of gameplay time, I think Notre Dame comes back and wins. It looked like they were driving at the end of the football game and had a fluke interception that just ruined their drive and sealed the win for Miami. But to me, if they continue and they look at the tape and say, hey, if we play like we did in this second half, we got a chance to beat anybody. Also, on the flip side, Notre Dame, if they lose this game, they might be out of the playoffs. I mean, look at their schedule. They don't have another quality win on their schedule right now that they can point to and say, "Hey, we're 10-2, and we beat USC." Is that what we're saying? Is that really does that sound like a playoff resume to you? Right? It doesn't to me. So backs against the wall for Notre Dame in week 3, which is really tough to say for any program, but that's truly the case here. They don't have a conference championship that they could go out and get. So that's what scares me away from this a little bit. Seeing what I saw in the second half from Notre Dame, knowing that they're at home, backs against the wall. I think that could end up being the reason why they end up winning this football game. Really like what I saw out of CJ Carr. I think that they have the weapons on the outside, on the perimeter for the first time. But to me, what's going to make a difference in this football game is Notre Dame's defensive line versus Texas A&M's offensive line. Notre Dame wasn't great going up against Miami, who has the best offensive line in the ACC, undoubtedly. I think they're
Maybe
the most experienced, maybe in the country, right? Well, Texas A&M might have the best offensive line in the SEC. They're also equally experienced, and so if A&M, kind of going to your point, and you're picking this football game, if they're able to push around that defensive line for Notre Dame, who lost a lot last year, Texas A&M might win this football game. What's surprising from A&M, I think, so far this year is that the defense isn't where it was last year. Defensive line, I know they lost a little bit on the defensive line, but still had a lot of players come back. I still expected A&M to be a top-tier defensive program in the SEC, and I haven't seen that yet. They've been giving up some points and some chunky yardage to lesser opponents that are just uncharacteristic. Does that continue, right? Does Jeremiah Love eat in this football game? I think that's very possible. But, I do like Marcel Reed. I think that he's been able to make some plays. We're in for another really close matchup. I think that Texas A&M -7 or +7, excuse me, is the play here. I think that this game is going to be much closer than that. I don't see either team winning by more than 7. And I really like Texas A&M's ability to travel, go play on the road. This rushing attack is really, really solid for A&M. Again, might be the best in the country, or best in the SEC, I should say. Who's going to run the football more effectively? That's what this game is going to boil down to, like a lot of them do. But in particular, these teams both want to run the football. Give me A&M to cover. I like Notre Dame to win it, just situationally here. I think that Notre Dame is in a little bit more of a do or die spot, and for that, being at home, some of the outside of the X's and O's reasons, I'm choosing Notre Dame to win this football game.
I think they can win it at home for sure. They're tough to beat there. There's no doubt about that. I just can't see them exceeding that touchdown mark in this one. But I will be there for it. 7:30 p.m. It's going to be a good one there at Touchdown Jesus. We'll see what happens with the Aggies and the Irish. All right, last one. Let's bust this thing out before my wife comes out here and kills me dead right here on camera. Vanderbilt at South Carolina. South Carolina is a 5.5-point favorite. Over under set at 48.5 for this one. I was really impressed with what Vanderbilt was able to do against Virginia Tech last week. I mean, that was very impressive. Got down early. I think 10-0 is about when they started kicking it on and deciding to do something offensively after some turnovers and some unfortunate plays. Really, once Vanderbilt was able to hit the accelerator, man, they really just laid it on Virginia Tech. And, they scored 20 more points on Virginia Tech than what South Carolina did earlier this season. So, this early in the season, having a common opponent like that, I don't know, man. This Vanderbilt team looks really, really exciting. We all know Diego Pavia. We all know what he can do and the exciting player that he is. He made one really bad throw in that Virginia Tech game. But other than that, I mean, he continues to just be an electrifying player in the SEC. Richardson looked really, really good at wide receiver. Alexander at running back. He's got a couple of touchdowns already this season. Now, South Carolina's defense, I think, is a pretty good bit better than Virginia Tech's, but man, Kyron Drones made some plays on Virginia Tech's defense, or excuse me, on Vanderbilt's defense, that made me really think that Lenora Sellers might be the X factor in this one, man. And I don't think that that's some kind of hot take or something. I mean, Lenora Sellers is top 5 in Heisman odds at this point, but I think he's really going to flex his muscles in this one. I think he's going to have to, man. I think whichever quarterback can put their team on their back at the end of this game is going to be the one that comes out with a victory. Again, I'm taking the underdog. I'm taking Vanderbilt plus 5.5 here. South Carolina still leaves a little bit to be desired on that offensive line, and Vanderbilt showed a propensity of getting after the quarterback last week that I don't think we really saw from them last year. I think that was kind of a piece that was missing for them last year, and it looks like maybe they've addressed some of those needs. And I don't look at South Carolina's offensive line and Virginia Tech's offensive line and see like this big, massive difference between the two. So I think Vanderbilt's going to be able to have some success getting after the quarterback. And how Lenoris handles that. Does he get out of the pocket? Is there somebody to account for that with Vanderbilt? I think that's kind of the chess match within the match that we're going to see on Saturday. But it's going to come down to Pavia versus Sellers in this one. And I think that we're in for a show, man. I actually think that this game is I'm going to buck the trend on the over-unders. I've been betting the unders a lot this week. I'm going over on this one, over 48.5. And I like the underdog here to keep it within a field goal. I think somebody kicks a field goal as time expires to win this sucker. But I think South Carolina can win it, but it ain't going to be by that many, I don't believe. Give me Vanderbilt plus 5.5 and give me the over.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that Vanderbilt is a sneaky team right now in the SEC. This is a Vanderbilt program for those who have seen what is it called? Any Given Saturday, the Netflix documentary that recently came out. You know, this is a Vanderbilt team that, right or wrong, believe that they're building something that is going to be the next dynasty in college football. That's truly what Clark Lee believes, and he has his team bought into that idea. That's a scary situation, and I think that when you've got a quarterback like Diego Pavia, who is an absolute gamer, a leader. If you haven't watched that show, I strongly encourage you to, because you gain a lot of respect for this Commodores team, what they were putting together. I don't think enough people are talking about Vanderbilt, and they think that last year was just a flash in the pan, this and that. If they can come in to Columbia, get the win against the Gamecocks this week, I guarantee you everybody's going to be talking about Vanderbilt. The freaking USA Today is probably going to be talking about Vanderbilt. I mean, it's really inspiring what they've been able to do so far this season, and really in the past 2 seasons. This to me could go a long way for the Commodores. I do agree with you, Mark. I think that they should be able to win this game. To me, it's really going to rely on the passing attack. We've been talking a lot about these rushing attacks for both teams, but to me, I haven't seen enough out of Lenora Sellers in the passing game. Does he take the next step, and is he able to push the ball downfield a little bit more? And then the same thing with Diego Pavia. Can he clean up some of these mistakes? Can he push the ball downfield again? And really just kind of put the pressure on South Carolina's defense. I know what South Carolina has in the front seven. They've had some injuries on the back end of the defense already this year, but the matchup is there for South Carolina in this defense to be able to beat Vanderbilt's offense. But Vanderbilt has been able to out-scheme some opponents and that have some better players on that side of the football than Vandy. I like Vanderbilt in this one. I think that they sneak up and get South Carolina on the road. Huge win for Clark Lee and the Commodores. Give me Vanderbilt to win this one. South Carolina takes the L this week. And that's going to do it for us. Mark had to step away, but we really appreciate everybody for watching this week. We will have more on the channel coming soon. Please give us a like if you made it this far. Give us a comment. Let us know what your picks are for this week. Give us some scores. Give us some predictions. We really appreciate you guys for watching. We'll see you again next time.